I was in a car accident with my wife, and what I found out while she was in the hospital changed everything I thought I knew about her. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Ryan Miller. I'm 34 years old, and I work as an electrician in Ohio. My wife, Emily, is 32 and works as a nurse. We had been married for 7 years, and from the outside, our life looked good. We had a modest house, steady jobs, and a routine that felt safe. I thought I had everything I ever wanted. That night, everything turned upside down. It was late, and the rain was coming down hard. We had just finished dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Emily had insisted we go out because she wanted a night away from stress. She seemed quiet during dinner, staring at her phone a little too often, but I didn't think much of it. I figured she was just tired from long shifts at the hospital. The streets were slick as I drove us home. My wipers were working nonstop, smearing the rain across the windshield. Emily sat beside me, scrolling through her messages. I remember glancing at her for a second, trying to make small talk, when headlights suddenly appeared from the left. A truck blew through a red light at full speed. I didn't even have time to think. The impact was deafening, metal against metal, glass exploding around us. My chest slammed into the seatbelt, the airbag hit me hard, and the world spun. When everything stopped, my ears were ringing. My side of the car was mangled, but I was conscious. Emily wasn't. I sat in that hospital room for hours that felt like years. The fluorescent lights never dimmed, and the steady beeping of machines was the only sign she was still with me. My body ached from the crash, but I couldn't bring myself to rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her lying motionless in the wreck, and it jolted me awake. The doctors came in and out, speaking in calm, professional voices. They told me she had broken bones and internal bleeding, but that she could pull through if she underwent surgery. The relief I should have felt was mixed with fear. Surgery meant risks, and all I could do was sit there powerless, waiting for news. In the middle of all that waiting, something strange started to happen. Nurses would stop by, glance at me, then whisper to each other. One of them asked if her husband was still outside. I almost laughed from exhaustion, telling them I hadn't left her side since she arrived. They nodded politely but looked confused, as if they weren't sure what to make of me. At first, I chalked it up to stress and miscommunication. Hospitals are chaotic places. Maybe records got mixed up. But the way they kept asking, as if expecting someone else entirely, dug at me in the back of my mind. Late into the night, I went to get a cup of water from the vending machine. On the way back, I passed 2 nurses talking quietly near the station. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I froze when I heard Emily's name. One of them said, "Her other emergency contact should be here soon. They already called him." My chest tightened. "Other contact?" I whispered to myself. Emily never mentioned anyone besides me. For a moment, I convinced myself it had to be a mistake, maybe paperwork from before we were married. Then I thought maybe it was her brother, or a cousin I hadn't met. But the tone in the nurse's voice wasn't casual. It sounded like they knew exactly who they were waiting for. I stood there with the paper cup in my hand, water spilling over the edge, suddenly colder than the rain outside. When I walked back into her room, she lay hooked up to wires, pale and fragile. I took her hand, staring at her face, but all I could think about was the question twisting in my head. Who else had the right to be called in an emergency? Why hadn't she told me? The clock ticked past midnight, and still I sat there, too wired to move, waiting not just for the doctors but for whoever this mystery person was. Each set of footsteps in the hall made my stomach knot tighter. I told myself I was being paranoid, but a part of me already knew something was coming, something I wasn't ready to hear. I turned to her, shaking, calling her name over and over. She wasn't answering. Blood trickled from her forehead, her body limp against the seat. My heart dropped into my stomach. I fumbled for my phone with trembling hands and called 911, begging them to hurry. The minutes waiting for help felt like hours. I kept my hand on hers, whispering, "Stay with me, Emily. Please don't leave me." The rain pounded against the wreck, mixing with the flashing hazard lights and the faint smell of gasoline. I was terrified the car would catch fire, but I couldn't leave her side. Finally, sirens cut through the storm. Firefighters pried open the door, pulling me out first even though I fought them, yelling that my wife needed help. They lifted Emily out carefully, laying her on a stretcher. She was still unconscious. The paramedics worked fast, strapping her down, checking her breathing. I kept asking if she was going to be okay, but no one gave me a straight answer. I rode in the ambulance with her, clutching her hand the whole way. Every bump in the road made me sick with fear. My body ached, but I barely noticed the pain. All I could think was that the woman I loved might not survive the night. At the hospital, they rushed her into the emergency room. I wasn't allowed inside, so I sat in the waiting area soaked in rain and sweat, my clothes torn, my face bruised. Time dragged. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I tried to call her parents, but the words kept getting stuck in my throat. I kept thinking about how she smiled at me that morning before work, how normal everything had seemed, and now here we were, her life hanging by a thread. I didn't know it yet, but this night wasn't just about the accident. It was the beginning of the worst heartbreak I would ever face. The sliding doors opened with a hiss, and I noticed a man rush in from the storm outside. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt damp from the rain. His eyes scanned the waiting area with desperation until he locked on to the nurse's desk. "I'm here for Emily Miller," he said, breathless, gripping the counter. "Please tell me she's okay. I'm her fiancé." I froze in my seat. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "Fiancé?" My first instinct was to stand, my legs shaky, my jaw tightening. The nurse gave him a look of recognition and began explaining her condition. That was all I needed to hear before I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, voice sharp. "What did you just call her?" He turned toward me, confused, almost annoyed that I had interrupted. "Emily, my fiancée. Who are you?" My pulse hammered. "I'm her husband." The words left my mouth louder than I intended, echoing through the hallway. The nurse's eyes darted between us like she had stumbled into something she didn't want to be part of. The man blinked, then let out a short, bitter laugh as if I was playing some twisted joke. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and shoved the screen toward me. There she was, Emily, smiling in pictures I had never seen, standing close to him in places I didn't recognize. Restaurants, parks, selfies in a car. And then the texts, messages dripping with affection, late-night promises, the kind of words I thought she reserved only for me. My stomach lurched. I wanted to believe they were fake, some cruel setup. But her handwriting in the captions, her voice in the little audio clips he scrolled to, left no room for denial. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, and for a moment, the noise of the hospital vanished. I managed to whisper, "This isn't possible." He stared back at me, anger flashing in his eyes. "I don't know who you are, but she told me she was done with her marriage. She told me she was moving on." Each sentence felt like a blade sinking into my chest. The air seemed heavier, my throat dry. Images of our years together flooded my head, holidays, vacations, laughter in the kitchen, all now twisted, tainted by what I was seeing in front of me. I wanted to yell, to demand answers from her immediately, but she was lying unconscious behind those doors. Instead, I stood there, shaking, caught between fury and disbelief. The man, Derek Collins, didn't back down. He kept repeating that he loved her, that she belonged with him. His certainty only deepened my confusion. Nothing made sense. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone had lived another life, one I hadn't even suspected. The nurse quietly excused herself, leaving us facing each other in silence. For the first time since the crash, I felt something stronger than fear. Rage burned hot in my chest, mixing with betrayal so raw it made my hands tremble. I didn't know how much more I could take, but I knew this was only the beginning. Derek's voice shook with anger as he stepped closer, his phone still clutched in his hand. "She told me she wasn't with you anymore. She said the divorce was happening. Why are you pretending this marriage is still real?" His words stabbed at me, but they didn't match the life I knew. Just last week, Emily and I had sat together at the kitchen table, flipping through brochures for a trip we wanted to take to Florida. We'd been talking about beaches, restaurants, and the hotel we might stay at. There hadn't been a hint of separation. Our house was still full of shared plans, shared bills, shared everything. I shook my head, gripping the back of a chair to steady myself. "That's not true. We sleep under the same roof. We share the same bed. There is no divorce." Derek's face shifted from anger to confusion, but he didn't back down. "She wouldn't lie to me about that. She told me you were just dragging your feet, signing the papers." Before I could respond, a nurse appeared and told us Emily was out of surgery. Relief hit me for a moment, but it was tangled with dread. We were both escorted to her recovery room. I didn't even look at Derek as we walked. Inside, she lay pale against the white sheets, her body weak, lips dry. Machines surrounded her, humming softly, a reminder that she was still here. Her eyelids fluttered, and slowly she opened her eyes. I leaned forward, wanting to reach for her hand, but the anger inside me held me back. Derek moved closer too, and for a moment, the room was so tense it felt like the air might crack. "Emily," I said, my voice hard, "tell me the truth. Who is he?" Her gaze drifted from me to Derek, then back again. Her throat worked as if the words were stuck. She tried to sit up, wincing in pain, before finally whispering, I didn't mean for it to get this far." Derek's eyes widened. "You told me you weren't with him anymore." Her weak voice faltered. "I told you what I thought you needed to hear. I couldn't choose. I thought I could manage both lives." I felt my chest tighten, the walls of the room closing in. "How long?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. She looked at me, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "Over a year." The floor seemed to fall from under me. A year, while I had been fixing the house, paying the bills, planning our future. She had been giving herself to someone else. I backed away from the bed, my hands trembling. Derek stood frozen, his face twisting as the truth settled in. The room spun around me, every sound muffled. Emily reached out weakly. "Ryan, please." I couldn't bear to hear another word. The weight of betrayal was too much, pressing down on me until I thought I might collapse. Without another glance at her or at him, I turned and walked out, each step heavier than the last. The hallway outside felt colder than the storm that had nearly killed us. My chest burned, my throat ached, but I kept moving, because staying in that room another second would have broken me completely. When I finally walked through the front door, the silence of the house pressed against me. The place should have felt familiar, safe even, but instead it looked different, hollow, like a stage where I'd been performing without realizing the script was fake. I dropped my keys on the counter and just stood there, staring at the walls that had watched us smile, eat dinner, and laugh, all while something darker was happening behind my back. I walked through each room slowly, noticing things I had brushed off before. The nights she claimed to be covering extra shifts now made sense. Her so-called weekend training seminars, the sudden errands that always seemed to come up when I suggested plans, none of it had ever sat quite right. I had chosen to believe her because the alternative was too painful. In the bedroom, the distance I had been pretending not to feel came crashing down on me. The coolness when I reached for her at night, the way she turned away with excuses about being tired. I had told myself it was stress, that long hours at the hospital drained her. Now I knew the truth. She wasn't tired. She was invested somewhere else. I opened drawers, searching without knowing exactly what I was hoping to find. In the back of her dresser, I discovered envelopes stuffed with receipts and credit card statements. Charges at restaurants I had never visited with, hotels in towns she never told me about, jewelry stores with purchases I had never seen. Then I found a small box tucked behind folded sweaters. Inside was a watch still in its case, clearly meant for someone else. The note inside read, "To Derek, can't wait to see you wear it." My hands shook as I held it. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest, until I could barely breathe. The realization hit me in waves, each stronger than the last. Our wedding vows, our shared dreams, every word of love she had spoken, it was all built on lies. The life I thought we had wasn't real. She had been splitting herself between two men, smiling at me while giving her heart to him. I dropped onto the edge of the bed, gripping the watch so tightly my knuckles turned white. Rage coursed through me, hot and bitter, demanding release. I wanted to smash everything in the room, rip apart the memories that mocked me. But I didn't move. I forced myself to sit still, because losing control would only leave me with wreckage and no direction. Instead, I stared at the walls until the fury started to harden into something sharper. My mind shifted from grief to calculation. I couldn't undo what she had done, but I could decide how to respond. She had stripped me of trust, of dignity. I wouldn't let her strip me of control. I placed the watch back in the box, slid the receipts into a drawer, and stood. The house no longer felt like mine, but I would use what I had found. If she wanted to build her secret life, she could do it without me, and she would pay for what she had stolen. Walking back into that hospital felt like stepping into enemy territory. The sterile walls and buzzing lights were the same, but the weight in my chest was different. I wasn't there as a husband clinging to hope anymore. I was there as a man who had seen the truth with his own eyes. When I entered her room, she looked up quickly, her face pale from recovery but softer when she saw me. Her voice cracked, fragile. "Ryan, thank God you came back. Please listen to me." I didn't move closer. I stayed near the doorway, arms crossed. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said, tears forming. "You have to believe that. I still love you. But Derek, he makes me feel alive in a way I can't explain." Her words twisted like a knife. She was asking me to accept that my love was second place, that my role in her life could coexist with someone else's. I felt the sting of every syllable, but forced myself to keep my face stone cold. "You don't get to use that word with me anymore," I said, my voice flat. "Love doesn't look like this." She reached for me, her hand trembling. "Please, Ryan, don't throw everything away. I need you. You've always been the one who takes care of me." I shook my head slowly. "You already threw it away. I'm not here to patch up what you destroyed." Her lips parted as if to argue, but nothing came out. She knew there was no excuse strong enough to erase what I had seen. I stepped closer, not to comfort her, but to make sure she heard me clearly. "I'm done. You made your choice, and you'll live with it. But know this." I leaned in, lowering my voice steady as steel. "I'll make sure you regret betraying me." The room went silent except for the rhythm of the monitor. She blinked rapidly, panic flashing across her face. For the first time, she seemed to realize I wasn't begging for her back. I wasn't broken at her feet. I was colder than she expected. From the corner of my eye, I noticed movement in the hallway. Derek leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, a smirk plastered across his face. He had heard every word. Looks like she's already chosen, buddy, he said, smug. Why drag it out? I didn't bother responding to him. His arrogance didn't deserve my energy. Instead, I looked at Emily one last time. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I could no longer recognize. Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving Derek with his smirk and Emily with her guilt. On the surface, it might have looked like I was the one who had lost. But deep inside, a fire had been lit. I wasn't going to scream, plead, or fight in that room. My revenge wouldn't come through words. It would come through actions, quiet, deliberate, and devastating. The morning after that confrontation, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of untouched coffee, staring at the phone in my hand. My mind was clearer than it had been in days. I wasn't going to beg her to explain, and I wasn't going to give her another chance. I dialed the number of a law office a coworker had once recommended, never thinking I'd need it myself. The attorney listened carefully as I explained the situation. I laid out every detail, our years together, the accident, the discovery, the other man. His tone stayed professional, but I could hear the edge in his voice when he said, "We'll make sure she walks away with nothing she doesn't deserve." That was all I needed to hear. Within hours, papers were being drafted. My marriage wasn't just broken, it was legally ending. Next came the harder step. I drove across town to her parents' house. They greeted me with worried faces, expecting an update on her recovery. I could hardly look them in the eye as I told them the truth. I described what had happened at the hospital, the other man, the lies. Her mother's hands shook as she covered her mouth. Her father's face hardened with disbelief. When I showed them the evidence Derek had shoved in my face, their expressions crumbled. The disappointment in their eyes wasn't just for her. It was for the betrayal of everything they believed about their daughter. Walking out of that house, I felt no joy, no satisfaction. Only a grim sense of justice. The image of their hurt would stay with me, but they deserved honesty. Meanwhile, Derek's perfect image of Emily was starting to fracture. Word traveled quickly, and when he learned she had hidden her marriage from him, his confidence began to falter. He wasn't the conquering hero he thought he was. He was just another fool in her tangled web. From what I heard, his questions grew sharper, his trust thinner. The cracks between them widened, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Back at my own place, I started making decisions. The house we had bought together had always been in my name. I contacted a realtor, signed the papers, and set the process in motion before she could even be discharged from the hospital. I packed what I needed, boxed up the rest, and prepared to leave it behind. By the time she returned looking for shelter, she would find nothing waiting for her. Each move I made was quiet, controlled. No yelling, no public drama, just deliberate steps removing every piece of security she once had with me. She had gambled with our life, and now she would face what it meant to lose it. I sat in the empty living room one last evening, the walls bare, the echoes of laughter and memories replaced by silence. I didn't feel triumph. What I felt was resolve. She had chosen lies and betrayal. I was choosing freedom, and ensuring she would feel the weight of her decisions long after I was gone. When she was finally released, her body was patched up, but her world was beginning to unravel. She came home expecting comfort, expecting a man at her side to help her through the pain of recovery. But the man she had chosen wasn't interested in being a caretaker. Derek showed up the first couple of days with flowers and promises, but his visits grew shorter, his excuses long. He made a show of affection in public, but avoided the messy parts, the appointments, the medications, the sleepless nights. At first she tried to ignore it, convincing herself he was busy, that once things calmed down he'd step up. But the truth crept in quickly. He didn't want the responsibility of her healing. He wanted the thrill, the excitement, the stolen moments. And now that reality meant helping her shuffle across a room or deal with the scars left behind, his patience thinned. It wasn't just the recovery that drove him away. It was the lies she had fed him. He had believed he was stepping into the role of her future husband, free of baggage, free of complications. Instead, he discovered that not only was she still legally tied to me, but that our life together had been much more intact than she admitted. His pride couldn't stomach that. The same smirk he once wore turned to suspicion, and before long, distance replaced warmth. Left with dwindling support, she reached for the one person she thought might still be there. Her calls started late at night, her voice fragile on the voicemail. "Ryan, please, can we talk? I need to see you. I know I made mistakes, but I can fix this." She sounded desperate, clinging to a lifeline she had already cut herself away from. I agreed to meet her once, not out of hope, but to put an end to her pleas. She sat across from me at the small kitchen table of my new place, her eyes rimmed red, her hands trembling. She tried to speak softly, like the woman I once trusted, reminding me of vacations we had taken, dinners we had shared, memories she claimed were still real to her. "I still love you," she whispered, reaching across the table. "Give me another chance. I can't do this without you." I pulled my hand back before hers could touch it. My voice didn't rise, didn't shake. It came out calm, colder than she expected. You made your choice in that hospital bed. You don't get to ask me for another one. The words landed heavy between us. She broke down, sobbing, pleading for me to reconsider, swearing she could change. But there was no space left in me for her promises. I stood and opened the door. For the first time, she realized there was nothing left to bargain with. Derek was slipping away. I was already gone, and the safety net she thought she'd always have had vanished. Watching her stumble out of my apartment, I didn't feel pity. Only the finality of what she had lost. The new apartment was small, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, the quiet felt strange. No footsteps in the hallway, no faint hum of another person moving around the kitchen. At first the silence pressed down on me, but in time it became a comfort. Every box I unpacked was a step away from the wreckage of what used to be my life. Work kept me grounded. Long hours on job sites gave me something to pour my energy into. My coworkers noticed the change in me. I wasn't the same easygoing guy I had been, but I was sharper, more focused. The hum of drills, the crackle of wires, even the weight of my tool belt helped steady me. I took pride in the rhythm of it, in knowing that my effort built something solid when everything else had crumbled. Outside of work, I started reaching out to people I had let slip away over the years. Old friends I hadn't grabbed a beer with in forever, cousins I only saw at holidays. I picked up the phone and they answered. They welcomed me back into circles I hadn't realized I missed. Weekends started to fill with barbecues, fishing trips, late-night conversations where I laughed harder than I thought I could after everything that had happened. Eventually, friends pushed me toward meeting new people. I resisted at first, convinced I wasn't ready, but curiosity crept in. A coworker set me up with a friend of his. We met for coffee. She was kind, funny, and nothing like Emily, and that was exactly what I needed. I didn't dive in head first. I kept things slow, cautious. But for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to enjoy the possibility of something new. Meanwhile, the past refused to stay quiet. My phone buzzed with missed calls, voicemails I didn't want to hear. Her voice filled the recordings, soft and pleading. Ryan, I made a mistake. Please, just talk to me. I know I ruined everything, but we can find a way back. Each message was a different version of the same story. Regret, promises, apologies. I never pressed call back. I never even typed a reply. I'd sit with the phone in my hand sometimes, thumb hovering over the screen, but I'd put it down every time. Those words meant nothing now. She had used them before, and I knew better than to believe them again. The messages piled up, growing more desperate. At first they came every other day, then once a week, until eventually they tapered off. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was a relief. I didn't want her voice in my life anymore. As weeks turned into months, the new apartment began to feel like home. I filled the walls with photographs from fishing trips, tools from my trade, little mementos of the life I was carving out on my own terms. I wasn't fully healed, but I was moving forward one choice at a time. And for the first time in years, I didn't look over my shoulder wondering what secrets waited in the shadows. Word spread eventually, the way it always does in a small circle of family and mutual friends. Derek had finally cut ties with her. At first, he made excuses about needing space, then those excuses turned into silence, and silence turned into absence. The man she had gambled everything on decided he wasn't built for the weight of her lies or the burden of her recovery. He slipped out of her life as quickly as he had stormed into it. Without him, her situation collapsed fast. Bills piled up, the medical costs were heavy, and the safety net she thought she could fall back on was gone. I had already removed my support, and her parents, still reeling from the truth I had shared, kept their distance too. Friends who once admired her pulled away, not out of cruelty, but because trust is fragile, and hers was gone. She was left with nothing but the consequences of her own choices. Alone in a small rental she could barely afford, her body still stiff from the accident, she had no partner, no home, no foundation. The life she had built on deception crumbled underneath her feet, and there was no one left to catch her. I didn't follow the details closely, but bits and pieces reached me. A cousin mentioned seeing her at the grocery store, thinner, looking tired. A coworker said she had asked about me once, her voice filled with regret. The messages she had once left on my phone had gone quiet, but through others I heard the same refrain. She wished she could take it back. When those stories reached me, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel pity either. What I felt was clarity. She had chosen a path, and that path had led her exactly where it was always going to end. I hadn't lifted a hand against her. I hadn't screamed or plotted some dramatic payback. I had simply stepped aside and let the truth unravel her. Sitting in my apartment one evening, the last of the moving boxes finally gone, I thought about everything that had happened. The accident, the discovery, the nights of anger. And then I thought about where I was now, working steadily, reconnecting with people who cared about me, even beginning to imagine a future with someone who might actually deserve my loyalty. For a long time, I had wanted to hurt her the way she had hurt me. But in the end, I didn't have to. Life did that for me. The damage she caused came back to her without me raising my voice. I didn't need to yell or fight. I told myself quietly, almost like it was the final line of a story. I just walked away, and life punished her more than I ever could. And with that realization, the weight I had been carrying lifted. For the first time since the crash, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not celebration, but freedom. My life was no longer tied to her betrayal. It was mine again. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have given her another chance? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe and hit the notification bell.